In chemistry, we do a lot of explaining why things happen. Why do reactions happen? What will be produced? And so there's a lot of scientific laws that describe the what relationships. There's also a lot of scientific theories that describe why we see those relationships exist. Now, a lot of times what we want to do is we want to explain why something is true, okay, or logically explain the process of how we came to a conclusion. So what I want to do in this video is talk a little bit, how do we think through these things and how do we present it in a logical fashion? Now, logical means that we're just starting to think about it systematically and kind of working through the information I start with connects to my middle information, connects to the end information. So we're going to look at an example on how we can think through this. So here I have the prompt that using the kinetic molecular theory, we want to explain why the temperature in Kelvin is directly proportional to the pressure of a gas. And thinking about this information, why would we use this information and how we can explain it, okay? So first off, we don't want to just state the relationship between temperature and pressure is that they're directly related. As one increases, then the other increases, okay? We're just stating what I just said here, what the prompt gave. The prompt gave they're directly proportional to each other. We're trying to explain why, okay? So let's go ahead and think, well, what do we want to start with? Well, let's start with our framework here, the kinetic molecular theory. Well, the kinetic molecular theory states that the average kinetic energy is directly proportional to the temperature. Okay, so that's going to connect to my temperature in Kelvin here. Okay, so I've thought through, okay, this average kinetic energy is related to my temperature in Kelvin. And as part of the kinetic molecular theory, we also state that the pressure is proportional to the number of collisions of the gas particles with the wall of the container. Okay, so now this is kind of like the two pieces that we want to use and think about how do we relate pressure here and the kinetic molecular theory, temperature here and the kinetic molecular theory. So now we want to explain why do we see that as we increase temperature, the pressure also increases, okay? Or as we decrease temperature, the pressure also decreases. Now when we're looking at this, okay, we have these two pieces. So we can start off in our logical explanation and say that the temperature is directly proportional to the average kinetic energy, which means that as the temperature in Kelvin increases, the average kinetic energy increases, and so does the speed of the particles. Okay, so we've identified first, as our temperature increases, our average kinetic energy increases, and so does the speed of the particles. Well, now, as the speed of the particles have increased, okay, well, that means that the number of collisions of the particles with the container of the wall will also increase. They're moving faster, they're going to collide with the walls more often, and therefore that's going to increase the number of collisions. Well, then we bring that back to this idea of the pressure is proportional to the number of collisions. Well, now if we've increased the number of collisions, we can go ahead and conclude then the pressure also increases. And that's because we know the pressure is directly proportional to the number of collisions. Okay, so now we see it doesn't have to be long, but we can succinctly describe this, but it fully encompasses our prompt here, using the kinetic molecular theory to explain why, as we increase temperature, our pressure increases. So as we're looking at an explanation and wanting to make sure we're clear and concise in our explanations, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we look at this and think, okay, I need to use the kinetic molecular theory. What do I know about the kinetic molecular theory that's important for my explanation here? Well, I know that it's important that my average kinetic energy is directly proportional to my temperature in Kelvin, and the pressure, which is what I'm also talking about here, is directly proportional to the number of collisions. I know those two pieces are important. So let's go ahead and include those in our description of explaining why our temperature is increased causes a pressure of our gas particles to increase as well. So again, as we're thinking through explaining certain topics or explaining our reasoning behind certain things, think about what information do I need to portray and communicate clearly. Well, I needed to communicate the kinetic molecular theory pieces that make sense in explaining why this is true. I didn't include everything about the kinetic molecular theory, and I didn't include everything about gas laws. Only the two pieces or two things that relate both of these together. Okay, so hopefully this gives us a good idea of how we want to think through explaining our reasoning, explaining certain relationships, and we're going to get more and more practice of this as the semester goes on.